Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/supportbuddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and we're studying Chapter 10 in this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This chapter is titled, What is Merit? This is a wholesome type of Kamma that you can learn about and then practice in order to help you move your way closer and closer to enlightenment. I'm going to be sharing this with you today and helping you to understand what merit is so that you'll have the ability to develop this practice as part of your journey to enlightenment. As we go, you're able to ask any and all questions that you like by putting those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. So I'd like to welcome all of you to our class today and invite you to participate in learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha as I help you to understand the path to enlightenment. This practice of merit, it's connected to things that we've already been discussing in our previous classes. I would like to just give you guys a little bit of an overview of something that I've been sharing the last 2 weeks. About 2 weeks ago, I shared with you Chapter 8, which is titled Transforming the Three Poisons, Craving, Anger, and Ignorance. This is where you were learning about the 3 high-level pollutions that are in the mind and keeping it in the unenlightened state. And I was also helping you to understand the wholesome qualities of mind that you need to cultivate in order to transform the mind away from those unwholesome qualities and towards the wholesome qualities. I discussed with you craving, anger, and ignorance, how craving is this longing and yearning, the chasing after the objects of your affection, wanting things to be pleasing all the time, craving permanence. It's a longing, a yearning, thinking the next new shiny object around the corner is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. So if your mind is craving, if you acquire the objects of your affection, you'll get conditioned pleasant feelings where the mind will experience happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria, feelings like this. But those are only temporary. They will arise, they will change, and they will fade away because the happiness is based on some condition, like it's sunny outside, or your bank account is this balance, or your mom called you, or your friends did this, or your boss did that. And this is a conditioned feeling that the mind is having based on some condition. Like maybe because it's sunny outside, you will get happy or excited or elated. But the problem with that is that when your cravings aren't getting fulfilled and they can't get fulfilled permanently, then your mind's going to move to this painful feelings like anger. This anger, hatred, ill will is going to arise in the mind because it's not getting what it wants. And this can happen as a result of not getting your craving fulfilled, or if you get your craving fulfilled and then that starts fading away because it's just a conditioned feeling of happiness and that condition is going to change, now your mind can move to these other feelings like anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, and others. And now when that occurs, those painful feelings that the mind is experiencing, one is uncomfortable with those feelings, so the individual will usually push them away. They'll push the person or push the situation away. This is called aversion. And the unenlightened mind thinks that this is actually solving the problem, that by pushing something away, that's going to get that thing out of your way, and now the mind thinks it's solved the problem, when in reality you haven't, because that's not the real problem. The real problem is the craving inside the mind. But because the mind misunderstands, it has this aversion and pushes the person or pushes the situation away. Or you might be bitter and harsh and hostile towards this individual or individuals, thinking that you're justified in your anger because the unenlightened mind thinks that these other beings are causing your anger. Or you might put your expectations on somebody, trying to force them or convince them to do things your way. The unenlightened mind thinks that if you can just get people to do things your way, i.e. you get your cravings fulfilled, then things will be perfect. But the problem with that is there's 8 billion people in the world, and you can't train 8 billion people to do things your way. And when you're pushing people away, when you're bitter and harsh and hostile with people, and you put your expectations on people, people choose to leave out of your life. And the number of people that you can spend time with becomes fewer and fewer and fewer. As your expectations and your wants grow, the number of people you can spend time with becomes fewer and fewer and fewer. So this isn't the way to live a wholesome life. And the reason why this craving and this anger continues in the mind is because of this third poison of ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. This is the confusion or the delusion. A Buddha wouldn't have referred to people as ignorant because that's a derogatory term nowadays. Instead, he's talking about this confusion or misunderstanding or this unknowing of true reality, the misperceptions that are in the mind. Because of the mind's lack of wisdom, it thinks that other people are causing you to get angry. This is what the unenlightened mind experiences. And as long as the unenlightened mind lacks this wisdom and truly believes that other people are causing you to be angry, that's why you'll push people away, you'll become bitter and harsh and hostile, or you'll put your expectations on people. But that doesn't solve the problem, or else you wouldn't get angry anymore. If that was solving the problem, you would be peaceful already. But that doesn't solve the problem. So it's this ignorance or unknowing of true reality that allows craving and anger to continue to persist. So each of these individual poisons, they have antidotes to transform the mind. With craving, the antidote is breathing mindfulness meditation to train the mind to let go, because with craving, the mind is holding on, it's chasing, it's wanting things to be a certain way. So when you're focused on the breath and the mind moves off the breath, you're cutting that off, letting it go, and bringing the mind back to the breath, building more and more of the ability to let go. And you're also practicing generosity, the giving and sharing of more than is strictly required in any given situation, of your time, effort, energy, and resources without any expectation of anything in return. This practice of generosity, which we're going to be talking about as part of today's class, is to help the mind to eliminate selfishness, where it can let go and no longer hold on to things so tightly. So this breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity is training the mind to let go of these cravings. And there's other things you'll need to do too, but this is the generalized training that is used on a consistent, ongoing basis. Then with the anger, hatred, ill will, and those lesser versions like frustration, irritation, annoyance, and others, you're using loving kindness meditation and then practicing loving kindness in your daily life through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. And then in order to transform this ignorance or this unknowing of true reality, you're working to learn and examine the teachings through investigation. You're reflecting on them to independently verify them, and then you're practicing them so that you can see the truth. And this is what helps you to acquire wisdom. That's why you're never believing any of the teachings of the Buddha, because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. But when you can get to wisdom, that's what's going to antidote your ignorance. And now you'll have the wisdom to apply the tools and techniques to eliminate craving and anger. And this is where you'll see real progress in the mind. And this is a high-level understanding that you need to start with, and then you get deeper into understanding the 10 fetters as you go forward. So the antidotes here are the breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity, the loving kindness meditation and the loving kindness being practiced in daily life through your intention, speech, and actions, and then developing wisdom. This is what's going to transform the mind. So the unwholesome roots are craving, anger, and ignorance. And then the wholesome roots are generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. This is what's helping you to now produce wholesome Kamma through wholesome decisions. Because last week I shared with you the natural law of Kamma, of cause and effect, or action and result, helping you to understand what wholesome Kamma and unwholesome Kamma is. Wholesome Kamma is when you're making harmless decisions, and then as you're putting those decisions out, you're not causing any harm, so wholesome things come back. And then When you're producing unwholesome Kamma, this is due to the harmful decisions that you're making. When you make harmful decisions, then because it's being harmful to others, now there's going to be unwholesome results that you experience. And the harmful decisions that one is making in the unenlightened state is coming from craving, anger, and ignorance. Because with craving, the mind tends to be very selfish. With the anger, there's that bitterness and animosity and hostility. And then with the ignorance, the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. And when you put decisions out through those three poisons or the three unwholesome roots, you're causing harm in the world. And now this unwholesome Kamma or these unwholesome results come back to you. The natural law of Kamma, or some people refer to it as karma. Karma is the Sanskrit version of this word, which is just a different language. The Pali version of this is Kamma, and the people who study the original teachings of the Buddha would tend to use the word Kamma. All this is cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions, where whatever decisions you make, there's going to be some result. It's not mystical or magical. It's not a black cloud following you around. It's not punishments and rewards. It's not even about who's at fault or who's right or wrong or who to blame. There's no entity that's overseeing the natural law of Kamma. It's just the results of your decisions, that there's a cause and effect that is occurring. Any type of effect or any kind of result that you experience, it's because of a cause or some action. So when you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, these pollutions that are in the unenlightened mind, it's causing harm. So therefore, unwholesome results are coming back to you. So what you're doing is you're transforming your mind through your practice of the Eightfold Path and all the teachings on the Eightfold Path to be able to move the mind to this generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, which are the three wholesome roots. And now when you're making decisions through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, which are the exact opposites of the unwholesome roots, now these wholesome roots in the mind are generating wise decision making that are then producing harmless decisions. And when you're practicing harmless decision making and you're putting out certain decisions, now you'll experience wholesome results coming back to you. And one of those wholesome decisions that you need to be able to make is the practice of generosity, where you're giving and sharing more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return. And you can share your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources. Well, merit is a type of generosity. It's also a type of wholesome Kamma. Merit is practicing generosity as a way to help the teachings of the Buddha continue to be shared in the world. Because if you're learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha and you're gaining benefit from that through all the various things that you're learning, then you start to realize that the only reason why you're receiving these teachings is because for 2,500 years, people have been practicing generosity. And for all these years, people have been sharing their time, effort, energy, and resources without any expectation of anything in return to help the teachings to continue to flourish in the world and be shared in the world. And now that you're receiving these and you're benefiting from these, now you might be in a position where you're thinking that you would like to also help other people gain access to these teachings. So you might decide to practice generosity of giving and sharing and taking action to frequently give something, such as your time, effort, energy, financial support, resources, or things like this, in order to help the continued sharing of the teachings of the Buddha. And this is going to generate the wholesome Kamma for you, because you're training your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. And it's helping other people to gain access to the teachings so that they can then experience the similar benefit of learning and practicing the teachings. And gradually over time, the world becomes a more kind, more loving, more peaceful society that we can all live in. And you can get to that peace and that joy even without other people changing. But as more and more beings improve the condition of their mind, the world just becomes a more and more peaceful place to exist. So I created this chart to be able to help, or this image, or this diagram, to be able to help you understand generosity, but then also to help you understand merit, because all merit is generosity, but all generosity is not merit. So it's important to understand what generosity is and also what merit is, because you're going to need to practice both of these in order to make your way to enlightenment. So generosity is just pure generosity, is giving and sharing more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return. And you might be sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources. If you're sharing with your neighbors or your family or your coworkers or somebody you don't even know that's just in the public, and you share with this individual, this is helping you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment in your own mind. And it's generating these wholesome results that you're now producing wholesome Kamma, and you're eliminating this selfishness of the mind. You're eliminating sensual desire of wanting to hold on to things so tightly. So when you're practicing generosity, you can ask yourself this question: was this an offering to a teacher to support the continued sharing of the Buddha's teachings to help others to attain enlightenment? Was it an offering to a teacher or a temple or something like this in order to help the continuation of the teachings of the Buddha? And if the answer is no, then this is generosity, and this is beneficial. This is helping you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, and eliminate those selfish desires, the sensual desires, producing wholesome Kamma. But if you ask yourself this question and it is for the benefit of helping the continuation of the teachings of the Buddha, and the answer is yes, then you're still getting the benefit of the craving, desire, attachment being reduced and eliminated from the mind, but you're also helping others to gain access to the teachings so that more and more people can experience the continued development of their mind and progress closer and closer to enlightenment. And it's also generating this wholesome Kamma, even more significant wholesome Kamma, because now not only have you just helped that one person maybe go into a store by holding the door or doing some other generous act, but now you're practicing generosity, and this is helping countless other people to be able to learn and practice the teachings to be able to then develop their mind. So anything that you see related to the teachings of the Buddha, this is all based on generosity. There's no requirement for anybody to practice generosity or to develop merit. This is a personal choice that each individual is choosing to make as a way to enhance the quality of their mind. So where I teach typically at the temple, at one time that land was owned by a Thai person, and they donated that land for the benefit of producing a temple. And now there were various people over many hundreds of years who donated their time, effort, energy, and resources to build the various buildings, to maintain the complex, and all these other things. And now there's the ability for people to come and learn and be in an environment where it's possible for people to learn and grow and develop on the path to enlightenment. So this is all practicing generosity that is then producing merit. And throughout Thailand, there's over 40,000 temples that are here, and they've been created as a cultural center or as a learning center, as a place that people can come and learn and grow and develop, as a community center where you can go into these various temples and there's somebody like me that's there that is able to then help you. It's essentially like a self-funded mental health network where there's no expectation that somebody is required to make an offering or give a donation or anything, but you can just walk in and find somebody that'll be able to help you with your career, with your relationships, and all the various things that you're struggling with in life, and then you can gain the wisdom of how to address those things. So Thailand has this complete network of mental health support all throughout the country that is self-funded, but there's no requirement to actually make a donation. So anybody and everybody can get help. And this is something that can be created beyond Thailand too. I know that at one time back in the 1970s, there was only 1 or 2 temples in a place like America, the USA. And now there's over 100, and they're continuing to grow based on generosity. So each of these countries all throughout the world, as various people are learning about the teachings and developing their mind, they can be practicing generosity and producing merit by creating this network of learning centers or this mental health network that people can dedicate their time and effort to developing their journey to enlightenment, developing their mind. And now there'll be people there that can be supportive of the local community to be able to learn and practice the teachings. So this is what merit is. It's a practice of generosity towards the continued sharing of Gautama Buddha's teachings, which is needed in order for more and more people to be able to experience the enlightened mental state. But it's never required, it's never expected, and as you're practicing it, it's always your own personal choice. So the Buddha teaches about generosity. Out of this book series, there's one entire book that's devoted to generosity. Volume 13 is part of this book series. And there's various teachings in there about generosity. And for this chapter in Volume 1, I extracted a few teachings that you need in order to get started with your practice of generosity and producing merit. So I'm going to share some words of the Buddha and some other teachings with you to be able to help you learn how to develop this practice of merit. So here, this is a teaching from the Buddha where it's titled An Unsurpassed Field of Merit for the World. Monks, these 8 persons are worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of reverential salutation, an unsurpassed field of merit for the world. What 8? The stream enterer, the one practicing for the realization of the fruit of stream entry, the once returner, the one practicing for the realization of the fruit of once returning, the non-returner, the one practicing for the realization of the fruit of non-returning, the arahant, the one practicing for the realization of the fruit of arahantship. So I'm going to pause here and explain to you what the Buddha is setting up for you, because you need to know other teachings in order to understand this. The Buddha's teachings are very clear, very concise, and very precise, but sometimes some of the teachings he's sharing is needing knowledge and wisdom of other teachings. So here what he's referring to is the 4 stages of enlightenment. That's what stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and arahant are. That these are the 4 stages of enlightenment. And what he's sharing is that if you're going to make offerings in order to produce merit, you would like to make offerings to somebody who's in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment. That's the first part. Then the other part where he's saying the one practicing for the realization of the fruit of stream entry, this is somebody who's not yet a stream enterer, but is practicing to become a stream enterer. And then the same thing with the one practicing for the realization of once returning. This is somebody who's not yet a once returner or in the 2nd stage of enlightenment, but they're practicing to attain that. So the Buddha is saying that these are the 8 individuals that it would be wise to share offerings with, because these are the individuals that are doing the real work in order to make their way to enlightenment. And as they gain more and more wisdom, then they'll be available to help other people to be able to then get to the enlightened mental state. So if you're making offerings to one of these 8 people, it's helping them to get closer and closer to enlightenment. And it's also helping you because you're coming in contact with those individuals to then be able to gain wisdom and be able to cultivate your journey to enlightenment and cultivating your mind. So here the Buddha is continuing on. He's saying, these 8 persons, monks, are worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of reverential salutation, an unsurpassed field of merit for the world. The 4 practicing the way, in the 4 established in the fruit. This is the upright community, composed in wisdom, in virtuous behavior, or moral conduct. For people intent on sacrifice, for living beings seeking merit, making merit that ripens in the acquisitions, what is given to the community bears great fruit. So what he's saying here is that he's talking about this upright community. During the lifetime of the Buddha, he wasn't the only teacher that was teaching and claiming that it was their teachings that lead to enlightenment. There were other teachers who were sharing teachings that were claiming that it was their teachings that led to enlightenment. But the Buddha knew that those teachings didn't lead to enlightenment. They were teaching people to hang themselves upside down from trees, to lay on beds of nails, to pierce the body with metal implements, to starve the body. The thought was that if you caused physical pain to the body, the mind could overcome this, and that's how you would get to enlightenment. But this isn't actually true. The Buddha did that for 2 years and it didn't work, so that's why he had to figure out how to do it on his own. So there were lots of people that were sharing teachings that were claiming that were leading to enlightenment. But the Buddha knew it was his community, the upright community, or sometimes he refers to it as the straight community. This is the community that is composed of wisdom and virtuous behavior. They have deep wisdom. So out of all the various people in the land that the Buddha was teaching in, they were making offerings to all different types of people. Some of the students were from the Buddha's community, but some were from the others. And the Buddha is saying, okay, if you make offerings to people who are learning my teachings, this is the upright community because they have this deep wisdom and this deep practice of virtuous behavior and moral conduct. And then it says, people intent on sacrifice for living beings seeking merit, making merit that ripens in the acquisitions. The acquisitions are the 4 stages of enlightenment and all the other attainments that as you learn and you practice and you make your offerings and you share with the community, this is helping you to be able to come in contact with somebody that is able to then help you to gain wisdom. And that's going to help you get closer and closer to enlightenment, developing your mind and getting closer and closer to any of the attainments on the path to enlightenment. And then he says, what is given to the community bears great fruit. Because whatever you give to a teacher or to a temple, they might use a certain portion of those funds in order to help them to sustain their life with like basic necessities of food, water, clothing, shelter, medical care, things like this. But this isn't going to be just for them. Any offering that you receive or anything that a teacher receives, this is used a little bit of it for the things that they need in order to sustain their life. But then they are supposed to be giving some of that back to the community in order to help them to then be able to share the teachings. So any offerings that are received by a individual who is sharing the teachings, they're going to use a portion of that for their temple or whatever it is that they need in order to facilitate the learning for the students. But the vast majority of what they're receiving is going to be coming back to the community. So that's why the Buddha is sharing that anything that is given to the community bears great fruit, because the offering that's coming in is then going back to the community as a way of helping the community to continue to grow and continue to develop, learning the teachings from that particular individual. So there's things that you might need to understand as it relates to this merit. The thing that you understand is that it's a practice of generosity. It helps a practitioner to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, the cause of discontentedness and rebirth. The generosity is there to help you eliminate that craving, the selfishness, the holding on. That's the cause of discontentedness. And it's also the cause of rebirth. So practicing generosity is helping you get closer and closer to enlightenment because you're eliminating craving, desire, attachment, the cause of discontentedness and the cause of rebirth. The Buddha never used anything like this in order to incentivize people to give money to him or to give supplies to him. He didn't try to guilt, shame, or fear people into doing that. Remember that he was a prince destined to become a king. So he was already very rich and very wealthy, that he left that and he became homeless, and then he was practicing where he would just receive donations of food, clothing, shelter, medical care from people who were willing to donate that to him. And then he used that in order to sustain his life, just a very basic amount of things. And there were people who built temples for him and things like this in order to allow him to be able to share the teachings and help more and more people. So he wasn't sharing generosity with his students in order to enrich himself because he was already rich in the past. He was doing this because that's what it took for him to get to enlightenment, is to practice generosity. He shared for 45 years from the age of 35 to 80 what it took for him to get to enlightenment, and he helped people to understand how to do that. And he observed that in his past lives and in his current life, it was a significant amount of generosity that he practiced that helped him to train his mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. So this is why he taught it as a way to help other people to gain the benefit of practicing generosity and then be able to experience the same results of the enlightened mind. So it eliminates this stain of selfishness that the mind is able to eliminate the holding on and wanting things to be pleasing just for yourself and only self-satisfying. It also helps you to eliminate doubt, that as you first come to the path to enlightenment, you might actually have doubt about the teachings of the Buddha. You might have doubt about whether the Buddha actually lived, whether his teachings will lead to enlightenment. You might have doubt about the community that you're part of. You might even have doubt about your teacher and their ability to help you get to enlightenment, or doubt about your own ability to get to enlightenment. So as you develop your life practice more and more with the teachings of the Buddha, and you're practicing these and transforming the mind and the pollutions coming out of the mind more and more, you can observe how the mind is peaceful and joyful more and more. And eventually you'll get to the point where you've made such improvement to the condition of the mind, you'll eliminate all doubt about the teachings. Not only about the teachings, but about whether the Buddha lived and existed, about this community that you're part of, about your teacher's ability to help you get to enlightenment, and your own ability to get to enlightenment, because you're actually experiencing more and more qualities of the enlightened mind as you're practicing the teachings. So through eliminating your doubt, you might get to a point that you see such improvement, or you've seen a certain amount of improvement, even just marginal improvement, and you would like to create more improvement by practicing generosity to produce merit. So you might decide to develop your confidence, and as you're developing your confidence, you might be more inclined to practice generosity to help the continuation and sharing of the teachings of the Buddha. As you navigate the Buddhist communities that are in the world, you might see different people that as you're making offerings and producing merit, that they might ask you to take this little urn of water and pour it out, and that this is you transferring the benefit of your good deeds to somebody else. And this isn't actually true, because you studied the natural law of Kamma last week and you saw that the Buddha taught that you can't transfer the wholesome Kamma that you create to somebody else. It's based on your decisions. And if you understand merit, that you understand the benefit is that it's producing the improvement to the quality of your mind by eliminating craving, desire, attachment, then you know that you can't transfer that benefit to somebody else. But unfortunately, now 2,500 years later, there's a lot of people that are really far away from the teachings of the Buddha, and they're practicing certain rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. And as soon as you see those things that are happening in a community, and even though they're attributing to the Buddha, or even though they're being done by an individual who shaved their hair and wearing certain clothes, this isn't the teachings of the Buddha. Whenever you see rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship, this isn't the teachings of the Buddha. So if you make an offering to somebody and they are encouraging you to take this little urn of water and pour it, and they'll usually be chanting while you're doing it, thinking that you're transferring your merit to someone else, this isn't actually possible. And your goal isn't to change that other person or to judge that person and think that they're bad for doing that or wrong for doing that, but just understand in your own mind that this isn't actually possible for you to do, that you can't transfer merit to somebody else, because the ultimate benefit is you're eliminating craving, desire, attachment, you're producing wholesome Kamma. The benefit that you're producing that's going to help others is you're making the teachings available to other people. That's the true benefit that you're actually producing. But you can't transfer the benefit of reduced craving in your mind by doing some kind of ceremony. So as soon as you see any kind of ceremony that's happening, this isn't the teachings of the Buddha. And if you understand the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots that I just shared with you in a summary form, then you understand the main problem here is this ignorance or unknowing of true reality, the confusion or delusion, the misperception or misunderstandings. And the antidote to that is wisdom. And there's no rite, ritual, ceremony, or worship that is going to produce wisdom. So if I sprinkled water on you, or I tied a string on your wrist, or anything else, that's not producing wisdom in your mind. That's keeping you in delusion. So by you being able to see the truth of that as you produce more and more wisdom in your mind, it's producing a better and better quality of mind, then you can see things like this and others that people are doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, that it's not possible to transfer this from one person to the other. In Thai, we call this Gotama, where they take this little water and they pour it out. So anybody who understands Thai, or they're in Thailand, or you're in any other Buddhist communities where they're doing these kinds of things, you'll just know that it's not the teachings of the Buddha. So if you're interested in making offerings at any point to a temple or a teacher, an ordained practitioner, or somebody like this, the Buddha provides guidance on how to make a particular offering. He explains that this is how you purify your offering, that the individual who's making the donation, they should be joyful before giving, that while they're giving, their mind should be calm and confident, and then after giving, their mind should be joyful. Here he's talking to a female, so he's using the pronoun she, but you can apply this teaching to any gender that you like. And the reason why he's teaching you this is to protect your mind, that you should put some thought into any kind of offering that you're making before you offer it. That's the joyful before giving. And then while you're making an offering, the mind can be calm and confident. And then after giving, your mind should also still continue to be joyful. Because after you made the offering, if you're like, oh my goodness, I gave too much, I shouldn't have given that much, that means you didn't put thought into what you were offering beforehand. There's still craving and clinging there, and you're now having this remorse. Or maybe you're thinking, oh, I didn't give enough, I should have gave more. Why was I so stingy? Why was I so selfish? I should have gave more. This is also remorse based on craving and clinging. So you would like to practice in such a way that before and after giving, the mind is joyful. And then while you're actually giving, the mind can be calm and confident. And then the Buddha teaches you about individuals to make this offering too. And before, he was talking about it in terms of the 4 stages of enlightenment. Well, here he's saying it in a slightly different way. He's saying that you should look for individuals who are free of craving, anger, and ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. That means they're actually enlightened. Or, he says, that are practicing for the removal of craving, anger, and ignorance. So if you see somebody who is sharing these teachings and they're smoking, they're gambling, maybe they're hitting animals, maybe they're using speech that is aggressive and hostile or bitter, maybe some profanity, maybe they've got some ego and arrogance in their mind, being boastful, this isn't the type of individual that the Buddha is suggesting that you support. Because if you put your time, effort, energy, and resources in that direction, that means you're supporting the smoking, you're supporting the gambling, you're supporting all these unwholesome and unwise decisions. So you would like to support individuals that are deeply practicing the teachings, because those individuals are committed to practicing the teachings. So therefore, they're able to cultivate wisdom to then share with other people and help them on their journey to enlightenment. If you can think about the lifetime of a Buddha, as more and more people understand that this individual is a Buddha, their community is just going to grow and grow and grow. There must have been thousands and thousands and thousands of people deeply studying with the Buddha. But there was also a certain amount of people that were shaving off their hair and wearing certain clothing like robes and things that were maybe looking like they were practicing the teachings of the Buddha and learning from the Buddha, but in reality, they weren't really practicing very closely. And the Buddha's not going to go around and monitor each individual student and check who's practicing and who's not, and then kind of giving them some kind of badge of honor or something like that. Instead, he's teaching you how to determine whether somebody is practicing the teachings very closely or not, so that you can make wise choices about who to make offerings to. And there's other teachings that he shares where he talks about looking at the condition of somebody's mind as a way to make a wise decision. Whereas if they have focus and concentration and clarity of mind, they're practicing the wisdom, they're sharing the wisdom. He's saying these are the types of individuals to share offerings with. Where if somebody's mind is muddled and confused, and maybe in their talks when they're teaching, they're just rambling, talking about pointless things that don't even connect to the teachings of the Buddha. Maybe they're constantly telling jokes over and over and over again just to get the audience to laugh and things like this. They're not really sharing the deep teachings that are good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, that are really helping somebody to be able to develop their practice. So you would like to look at the condition of someone's mind. Are they focused? Are they clear? Are they concentrated? Are they sharing the original teachings of the Buddha, using the original words of the Buddha? These are the types of individuals that you would like to support. And that way it brings the teachings into the world for you and for others to benefit as well. Then some other things that I'll share with you guys before I open up for questions is something called the way of practice. This is the way that you can kind of boil down all the things that the Buddha teaches into what can I do right now today in order to make my way further on this path to enlightenment? Because so far in this group learning program, you've learned things like the three universal truths, the four noble truths, the eightfold path, the middle way. You've learned the 5 precepts. You've learned about the 3 poisons, the natural law of Kamma. You've learned about breathing mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation, and chanting, all these different things that I've been sharing with you. You might ask yourself, well, what can I do today? How can I boil this down to what should I do on a day-to-day basis? And the Buddha provides that, and we call it the way of practice. There's the practice of generosity, of moral conduct, and meditation. These are the 3 things that you would like to be doing on a continuous, ongoing basis, day by day. So the generosity is what I've been sharing with you. This is the giving and sharing of more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return. Sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources. And I explained to you how to determine whether what you're sharing and practicing is just generosity or whether it's actually merit. So if I hold the door for somebody as I'm going into a store, this is a practice of generosity, but it's not merit. Or if I decide to donate blood at my blood bank, this is generosity, but it's not producing merit. Or if I notice that somebody drops something on the ground as they're walking and I pick it up and hand it back to them, this is generosity, but it's not merit. So you need to be practicing generosity in multiple directions. And then part of that generosity, you might decide to practice and develop merit through making offerings to a temple, a teacher, or somehow providing the ability for the teachings of the Buddha to continue and be shared with other people. Then there's a certain amount of moral conduct that you will be interested to practice. This is shared with you in the Eightfold Path as part of right speech, right action, and right livelihood. This is what you would like to practice in order to help you to move your mind closer and closer to enlightenment and move your practice closer and closer to enlightenment. The practice of moral conduct is helping you to eliminate your harmful decisions and produce harmless decisions. Because as long as you're producing moral conduct that is harmful and you're putting that out into the world, then harm is going to be coming back to you. But by you practicing things like right speech, right action, and right livelihood, the Buddha is helping you see the natural law of Kamma of what would be harmless decisions around your speech, actions, and livelihood. And now if you're practicing that in daily life, dialing it in closer and closer, now you're putting less and less harm in the world, so less and less harm is coming back to you. And eventually, when you fully purify your moral conduct, you won't be making any harmful decisions. All your decisions around your moral conduct will be harmless, so therefore you'll only be experiencing wholesome results coming back to you. And what's going to be helping you to accomplish these things is your meditation, your breathing mindfulness meditation, and your loving kindness meditation, which you're doing on a consistent, ongoing basis, building up to 2 or 3 sessions per day for 30 minutes or more. And of course, it's going to take you time to build up to this. Some people I've seen it take maybe 6 months or a year or 2 years to build up to that, because you need to create more and more space in your life to be able to then practice this meditation. So these are the 3 things that you would like to be doing on a consistent, ongoing basis. And as you are, you will notice that the condition of the mind will be gradually improving. And then you can filter in some of the other techniques and tools that the Buddha teaches you to further develop your practice. So I'm going to pause here and see what questions you guys might have. You can ask those by putting them into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. Okay, it looks like Sumit, you have a question. If you'd like to go ahead and ask your question.
In Angulimala Sutta, Angulimala did something like of sharing how to see that for a pregnant woman. You might have heard the story.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Your connection got broken up a little bit there. Can you repeat your question?
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, I can hear you. It just got broken up a little bit when you first started talking.
Okay. So in Angulimala Sutta, Angulimala did something for a pregnant lady, like Buddha told him to, by remembering his good actions after taking part in Sangha, he can some kind of pray for the pregnant lady for her well-being and for her fetus. and then they got when the child was born, they were healthy, something like that. So what was Buddha actually was trying to teach Angulimala there?
I'm not
Do we
familiar.
see it as sharing of merit? I mean,
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the sutta that you're talking about. You're welcome to share it with me in a message or posting in the Facebook group if you like. If it's talking about prayer or if it's talking about transferring merit to another person, this isn't the teachings of the
no,
Buddha.
he's not. No, he's not directly talking about. He just sent back Angulimala to the pregnant lady. He saw doing his arms round, and he told the Angulimala that he should think like this: that may this lady and her fetus be well and healthy with his by remembering his own own good actions he has done after being part of the sangha.
Yeah, if you would like to share that with me either by posting in the Facebook group or send it in a private message, I can look at it and help you understand what the Buddha is teaching there. But what you're sharing with me doesn't sound like what the Buddha would teach, but I need to look at it to be able to know for sure.
Okay, I will send you that.
Okay, sounds good. It looks like here in Facebook, Mayu Lee has a question. Just would like to verify if I'm understanding correctly. So if we offer our generosity to someone who is working their way to the first stage of enlightenment, but have not yet reached first stage of enlightenment, is considered merit. Yes, if you're making that offering and those individuals are not only working towards attaining the first stage of enlightenment, but maybe they're even working towards being a teacher or these things like this. This is actual merit. And that's what the Buddha is explaining, is to develop your practice where you can identify these individuals that are in one of the four stages of enlightenment or practicing for one of the four stages of enlightenment. And by you cultivating that wisdom and then making offerings to those individuals, then that's going to be able to help them to get closer and closer to enlightenment, which ultimately is helping you because you're coming in contact with an individual who has the wisdom of how to get to the first stage or second or third or fourth stage of enlightenment. And then Mayuli's following it up. She says, even if that person is your mom, yes, if your mom is either practicing for the first stage of enlightenment or in the first stage of enlightenment and you're making offerings to her, this is still merit. So you can learn how to identify if somebody's in these four stages of enlightenment or practicing for those four stages of enlightenment. That's not something that I have here in this particular discourse or this teaching or in this chapter of the book, but there's other chapters that I share in the entire book series that helps you to be able to determine if somebody is in any particular stage of enlightenment. Okay, so these are all the questions that I'm seeing so far. So I'm going to keep on going and sharing more with you guys to be able to help you guys understand more about this topic of merit. So here's some more words of the Buddha on this particular topic of generosity. This one is titled, If Beings Knew the Results of Giving and Sharing. He says, monks, if beings knew, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, nor would the stain of selfishness obsess them and take root in their minds. Even if it were their last bite, their last mouthful, they would not eat without having shared it, if there were someone to share it with. But because beings do not know, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they eat without having given, and the stain of selfishness obsesses them and takes root in their minds. So here the Buddha is talking about the results of giving and sharing, that if people knew the results of this, that they would not eat without having given. The results that he's talking about is the enlightened mind. If an individual knew how peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy that the mind is in the enlightened mental state, in the focus, concentration, clarity of mind, and deep memory, the results of having relationships that are all peaceful and you don't have any hostility or aggression in any of your relationships. If people understood this is the results of giving and sharing and that practicing generosity is what leads to this, the Buddha is saying that there isn't even a meal that you would eat without having shared it, even if it was your last bite or your last mouthful. If there's someone to share it with, you would share it. Because in the unenlightened mind of the human being, it functions very much like an animal. If you think about animals, they don't share food. They don't practice generosity. They tend to hold on to things very tightly for the most part in the animal world. Well, beings that are being reborn into the human world, even though they're in a human body and a human consciousness, their mind has been conditioned by countless rebirths in the animal realm. So this is why we see people who kill, steal, have sexual misconduct, that they're not able to practice generosity of giving and sharing, but instead they're holding on to things very tightly. So in the unenlightened state, you might find that you hold on to your food very tightly, and this is very challenging for you to give and share. So what you would like to do is revert that. You would like to transform that. So say you're in a group of people and you open a bag of potato chips, or you're at a meal and there's food that you're eating. You would like to feel comfortable to be able to share your food with others. And this is actually going to help you to cultivate the mind and practice generosity. This isn't merit unless you're sharing it with a teacher or an ordained practitioner or something like that. But this is still generosity that you need to be able to practice. So whether you're eating or something like this, if you have any kind of food, or if you go out to buy food for yourself, if you buy food for other people as well and you share that with other people, this is going to help you to eliminate that stain of selfishness and make your way closer and closer to the enlightened mental state. Here the Buddha is talking about 5 benefits of giving. So I'll read this one to you and then I'll help you with certain aspects to understand. He says, monks, there are these 5 benefits of giving. What 5? 1 is dear and agreeable to many. Wholesome persons go in large numbers to 1. 1 acquires a wholesome reputation. 1 is not deficient in the householder's duties. With the breakup of the body after death, 1 is reborn in a good destination, in a heavenly world. There are these 5 benefits of giving. By giving, 1 becomes dear. 1 follows the duty of the wholesome. The wholesome mentally disciplined monks always go in large numbers to 1. They teach 1 the teachings that dispels all discontentedness, having understood which, the taintless 1 here attains nibbana, or enlightenment. So here the Buddha is describing 5 individual benefits of giving and sharing. While these 5 benefits are things that you will experience, you're not interested in giving and sharing, expecting these things to occur. If you have an expectation for these things to occur, then your mind isn't practicing pure generosity yet. But the Buddha is explaining this to you so that you understand the natural law of Kamma, that as you're practicing generosity and you see these things occurring, then you'll know that these teachings are true, and he's explaining to you this natural law of Kamma and what you're actually experiencing. So the first 4 are pretty self-explanatory and pretty straightforward, but you can ask any questions that you like about those. But I would like to focus in on number 5 to help you understand this one a bit more, where he's talking about that if you practice generosity, that there's this potential of being reborn in the heavenly world. It's important to understand that the goal of the teachings of the Buddha aren't to be reborn in heaven. That's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is for you to train your mind and get to enlightenment and escape the whole cycle of rebirth. The beings that are in the heavenly realm, they're still in the cycle of rebirth. They haven't escaped the cycle of rebirth yet. They're still in existence. And those beings in the heavenly realm are oftentimes very complacent because they're experiencing exclusively pleasant feelings. They oftentimes aren't learning and practicing to get to enlightenment. So they're oftentimes reborn into the other realms. The heavenly realm is not a permanent existence. As you see, all these things around you are impermanent. So an existence in the heavenly realm isn't permanent either. The reason why he's sharing this here is not because your goal should be to get to heaven, but the same things that lead to enlightenment are the same things that lead to an improved rebirth if you're going to be reborn into the heavenly realm. It improves your rebirth if you're reborn back into the human realm, or it improves rebirth into a heavenly existence. But that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to get to enlightenment in this life, so there's no rebirth anywhere at all. But anything that you're doing in this life, if you fall short of enlightenment for any reason, it can result in a rebirth in the human realm that is an improved rebirth in the human realm, or perhaps a rebirth in the heavenly world. So that's why he's explaining that to you here. The ultimate goal is what he's sharing here, is that you reach this taintless, meaning there's the elimination of pollution or the defilements or the fetters. All those 10 fetters have been eliminated from the mind, and that's what produces enlightenment. Those are the 10 individual pollutions. But you need to build up your practice gradually, slowly but surely, to get to that point to be able to eliminate those 10 fetters. So that's why this group learning program, as a foundational program, focuses on helping you build the foundational teachings that you need. And then as you develop those more and more, you'll be eliminating the actual 10 fetters. Here's a teaching from the Buddha, which is titled, Gifts of Teachings is Superior Than Gifts of Material Things. Monks, there are these two kinds of gifts, a gift of material things and a gift of the teachings. Of these two kinds of gifts, this is supreme, a gift of the teachings. There are these two kinds of sharing, sharing of material things and sharing of the teachings. Of these two kinds of sharing, this is supreme, sharing of the teachings. There are these two kinds of assistance, assistance with material things and assistance with the teachings. Of these two kinds of assistance, this is supreme, assistance with the teachings. So when you're practicing generosity in the direction of producing merit, where you're going to be sharing the teachings of the Buddha with others through you practicing merit, this is what's going to occur. The Buddha says that this is the very high quality thing that you can actually be doing. That, for example, you could give your parents all kinds of cars or houses or money or clothing or electronics or things like this. Those are gifts of material things. But giving the gift of the teachings that make those available to others to be able to learn and practice to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state of enlightenment, the Buddha is saying that's the supreme gift that you could ever be giving to anybody. If you asked yourself that you could press this button and you could become peaceful and joyful for the rest of your life, or you could press this other button and stay angry and frustrated and irritated the rest of your life, ask yourself, which button would you press? Well, I think the vast majority of people would press the button that would produce peacefulness and joy for the rest of your life. Well, unfortunately, it's not a button that you can press. You need to apply time, effort, energy to developing your practice and cultivating the mind. But you wouldn't be able to do that if you didn't have the teachings available to you. So for 2,500 years, people have been practicing generosity, producing merit, so that those teachings can become available, so that more and more people can get to this peaceful and joyful mental state. So if you're going to give something to your family or your friends or other people in the world, it would be these teachings that are going to produce the most benefit, because those cars, those houses, those clothes, those are all impermanent. They arise, they change, and they fade away. But the wisdom of how to get to enlightenment, it's permanent. That you can cultivate this in your own mind. You can then make it available for others by practicing generosity and producing merit. And then lastly, I'll share this last teaching with you guys before I open up to any and all questions that you guys have. This is where the Buddha is talking about mutual support between monks, Brahmin, and householders. First, let me help you understand what a Brahmin is before I share this teaching with you. What a Brahmin is during the lifetime of the Buddha and even now, there are individuals that were practicing such that they were born into a particular family. This is a caste system. And these Brahmin are thought to be very holy people, and that individuals needed to go to them in order to perform some kind of rite, ritual, ceremony, or worship in order to improve your life. So people during the lifetime of the Buddha and even now, they are believing and convinced that they can't do anything necessarily to improve their life, but they need to go to these other people. They need to pay money, and by paying money, they are then situated such that those Brahmin are going to do some kind of rites, ritual, ceremonies, and worship, and now they're supposed to go home and their life gets better. But the Buddha realized that this isn't true and it doesn't work, that it's wisdom and training your mind that's going to produce a better life for yourself. That if you went to somebody and they performed some rite, ritual, or ceremony, but you went home and you were harsh and bitter and hostile to the people around you, your life is going to be quite miserable. So the Buddha was teaching all different types of people during his lifetime, and the Brahmin were some of the types of people that were coming to him to learn. Even though they were doing rites, ritual, ceremonies, and worship, they were still coming to the Buddha to learn about his teachings. So here, the Buddha is talking to the monks. He says, monks, Brahmins and householders are very helpful to you. They provide you with the requisites of robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicine. in the time of sickness. And you monks are very helpful to Brahmins and householders, as you teach them the teachings that are good in the beginning, the middle, and the end, with the correct meaning in wording, and you proclaim the spiritual life in its fulfillment, in complete purity. Thus, monks, this spiritual life is lived with mutual support for the purpose of crossing the flood and making a complete end of discontentedness. So what he's sharing is that there's this mutual support, that the students are sharing certain offerings with the teachers, with ordained practitioners or teachers. There's certain offerings that are coming so that those people don't have to go to a career, they don't have to continue to do worldly things, but they can just focus on developing their own practice. And by developing their own practice and the wisdom of how to get to enlightenment, then they have that wisdom to then be able to share with other people to be able to help them get to enlightenment. So there's a certain amount of offerings that are being offered to individuals who are deeply practicing the teachings. And then what's coming back to those individuals are the teachings to be able to help them. Where like if I was still in my career and working to have a business and all these other things that an individual might do who's pursuing a career, I wouldn't have the time to develop and write books and consult with students and teach classes and do live streams and edit podcasts and all the different things that I do. But by students choosing to support me as a teacher, I'm then available to help other people to learn the teachings of the Buddha. And I don't have any expectation that a student will support me, but if somebody does choose to support me, I choose to use a small portion of that for certain food, water, clothing, shelter, and medical care, and then I provide the benefit of those offerings where I need to purchase things like lights or microphones or things at the temple or a way to bring the teachings to you. So this Kamma is that as you're making an offering and practicing generosity to produce merit, it's helping to improve your mind, it's helping to make the teachings available to others, but also it's coming back to you in a way of teachings to be able to help you to be able to learn and develop your practice. And this is the mutual support that the Buddha taught during his lifetime, and it's been going on for over 2,500 years, where if it wasn't this way, whereas if I was in a career and so forth, not only would I not be able to be so focused in sharing the teachings of the Buddha with you, but an individual who gets to enlightenment and is still doing something else, they're not necessarily motivated in order to share the teachings with others. But by having your livelihood and my ability to eat and sustain this life is connected to teaching, that not only am I teaching because I have loving kindness and compassion and interested to help people to continue to grow, but I know that I don't eat if I don't teach. So I've created a lifestyle and I've made choices to go in this direction where I could have stayed in business, I could have stayed working in a career, and then I would know that I would have a certain amount of money available for anything that I needed to conduct my life. But by the Buddha teaching the teachers and the ordained practitioners to let go of worldly life, if they're choosing to teach, to just fully get involved in sharing the teachings, now there's this interconnectivity between the teachers and the students are able to practice generosity. The teachers are able to practice generosity by sharing the teachings without any expectation of anything in return. And now this is helping all the individuals through practicing generosity to get closer and closer to enlightenment. So this is everything that I have to share on this particular topic at this point. Remember, I teach to a certain level of detail, and then I wait for students to ask questions that go deeper into understanding more about any particular topic. So if you have additional questions or if you'd like to penetrate deeper into understanding this topic, feel free to ask questions through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you would like. Okay, it looks like Bruce is asking some questions here, and Mayu Lee has some as well in Facebook. So Bruce is saying, along with offering donations, do you have a list of things that your students can assist you with to further these teachings of the Buddha for the benefit of all beings? I don't keep a list of things, Bruce, but there's typically things that are going on that a student could get involved in. And if a student asks me, then I would share something with them. So if somebody sends me a private message or something, or post something in Facebook group and saying, hey, David, what are the things that you need in order to continue to share the teachings of the Buddha I would then think about the things at that particular moment and then share that with individuals. Because remember, we're practicing the second precept, which is awaiting what is given. We're not putting expectations on people or requiring anybody or creating a list of what we need. Instead, we're just waiting for people to choose. If someone chooses to make an offering, great, and we'll accept that offering. And if they choose to say, hey, what else can we do? Do you need help with editing your podcast? Do you need help with editing videos? Do you need help with this or that? Or, what can I be doing? You can ask those things on a case-by-case basis. And then I'd be able to share with you at that point. But I wouldn't initiate that kind of conversation. But if a student initiates it, then I can have that type of conversation, because then I'm awaiting what is given. And a teacher who's practicing this way shouldn't have any expectation from their students to make an offering, but it is very helpful that as students do choose to make an offering, that they're able to do that to practice merit and generosity for themselves, but then it also helps the community to continue to grow. So you're welcome to ask me those kinds of questions either in class or in the Facebook group or in a private message about what you might need. Because a lot of the people that study with me are overseas, it's sometimes not possible for them to come to the temple and clean the bathroom or sweep the floor or things like this. So sometimes people are offering financial support so that I can then do those things. But there are things nowadays like editing podcasts or videos or things like this that a student might choose to do, or moderating a class or different things like this, depending on what a person has available as time. Here in Chiang Mai, there's students who do come to the temple and clean the bathroom, sweep the floor. There's, of course, financial support as well. There's things like this. But if you reach out and ask, then I'll look at what might be available, and then you can let me know if you'd like to offer any of those things. Mayuli is asking, I do share the Buddhist teachings similarly from various suttas to friends and family that are interested in listening to help them overcome obstacles in life. Is this considered merit? Yes, because you're sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources more than is strictly required for the benefit of the continuation of the teachings of the Buddha. And it's very key that you said here for people that are interested in listening, because if you were just forcing the teachings on somebody, this would be your craving, desire, attachment, and you're not interested in that. And that is just going to push people away from you. But for people who are asking you questions, who are interested in listening and understanding the teachings, this is still producing merit, because you're helping the teachings of the Buddha to continue to share it in the world. And it's not just that you're helping the Buddha, you're helping those people, you're helping the world, you're helping that the world becomes this more kind, gentler, and loving society, because these teachings are able to reach the rest of the world. And we know that these teachings are the truth because they produce this enlightened mind, and there's people that are enlightened today that we know that these teachings are indeed the actual truth. But we don't go out and push them on people or force them on people. But when people are interested in learning and interested in listening to practice, then we can share it with them, and we can help others to experience more and more improvement to the condition of their mind and the condition of their life. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So you guys must understand this topic to a certain degree. And what I'll do then is just thank all of you guys for coming to class and deciding that today's the day that you would like to learn the teachings of the Buddha, and at the same time invite you to our future classes. Each Sunday and each Wednesday, I'm sharing teachings from the group learning program in this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. You can get this book from our website, buddhadailywisdom.com, and from there you can download it for free. You can take it and go print it if you like, or you can get printed copies on Amazon if you have access to Amazon, or you can get them here at the temple in Chiang Mai. So you would like to be reading along with the group learning program. And next week on Sunday, we're going to be in chapter 11, which is titled Meditation, Developing Your Practice. This is where I'm going to go through and teach you the 4 different types of meditation that the Buddha taught. There's only 4 that you would potentially need in order to get to enlightenment. There's 2 primary forms of meditation that every practitioner is going to need in order to get to enlightenment through the teachings of the Buddha. And then there's 2 specialized meditations that only individuals are going to need in a unique situation. But I'm going to teach you all 4 of those through chapter 11. And you can read that before the class and or after the class. This is one of the longest chapters because I'm explaining a lot of details about meditation. It'll probably take you a good hour, hour and a half to read this chapter, but you would like to do it in little increments, maybe 15 or 20 minutes at a time, so you can take small little bites, digest it, and then move on from there. So maybe each day, just read 10, 15, 20 minutes, and then over the course of the week, you'll have learned the entire chapter. And then when I teach it to you next week, you might have certain questions that you would like to ask related to that particular chapter. And remember, you can get the book from our website. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to be doing guided breathing mindfulness meditation. So you can come to class or listen to the replay of any of these classes, either on YouTube, Facebook, or our podcast. And after we do the guided breathing mindfulness meditation, I will open up to any and all questions that you guys have related to your journey to enlightenment and the path to enlightenment, the teachings of the Buddha. So once again, thank you all for joining for today's class. Perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee khap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.